Anybody can look at it and go, that's clearly not as bad. Right. And we have to sit here and like come up with a way to justify that to like the Poindexters of the world who are going to be like, well, actually, we can't determine that effectively yet. And it's like, well, you could use your goddamn common sense and look at what the fuck is happening, and you'd be able to tell. But because you don't have 60 years of data, you feel like you can't make a determination. And like, that's just lame.
Well, let me tell you the real crux of the situation. Has been created by the media. Yeah, there's your Poindexters, but and of course your people who've never vaped or never really looked into
so like
it
those
or
are
just
the
know
people
what they're
online
told.
who will get into the big arguments, right? Like the guys who champion the cause of.
But even let's talk about the politicians or the ones writing the bills, and there are two sections of them. There's some that are fed the stories through the media and activist groups fed one presentation, or maybe they think which often that presentation is teen vaping epidemic, which is non-existent, and then there's those that know the real true deal. And what the real true deal is that in the 90s, all the states in the U.S. got together and sued Big Tobacco. They said, hey, these cigarettes, you've been marketing them these ways and blah, blah, and there's this percent, and now we're seeing people showing up at the hospital either sick or bronchitis or all of these things, and it's eating into our state's budget, having to take care of all these sick people, which we're, realizing they're sick because of cigarettes. So, they put limitations on how they could advertise, and, Camel couldn't be advertised on race cars and TVs and all these things, and they had to put the, warning on there and all that jazz. But one other part of that settlement was that cigarettes would pay the states a tax on everything sold in that state. And that was kind of worked out state by state. Some states have higher cigarette taxes than others. That was to be negotiated. So they worked out this tax. And, places like New York, they've got a heftier tax. They tax the shit out of it, but they also know they've got, a dense population and a lot of people smoke. So that's become part of their budget. So not only did it become part of their budget as an agreement between the master settlement agreement, but as the way the government does in mishandling finances, they said, oh, these cigarettes, they're not going anywhere. It's only a growing rate. It's become cool. Now we're covering our costs and we've got all this extra money. I mean, I think New York was not too long ago getting somewhere in the lines about like 1.7 billion per year in cigarette taxes.
That's good money. That's a good revenue.
Yeah. So they started realizing what's coming in and expected growth calculations and stuff, because vapes weren't even thought of yet. And they sold bonds. They sold bonds based on their future expected nicotine tax revenues.
Of course.
So they sold those bonds. They leveraged that future expected revenue at a growth rate as it had been. And then here, early 2000s, come along vapes, and it was like the Wild Wild West. It didn't really seem like a thing. They didn't expect it to take over. And then at some point it took hold. And then that's when you see states like New York with some of the largest cigarette revenue having the harshest taxes and laws against vapes. Because there's no flavors, and
they're trying to create a disincentive so that people will stay smoking, so that they can deliver on the expected revenue calculations that make their bonds remain valuable. Right. Like, because that's supposed to be like one of the surest investments that a person can make is a government bond. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And so if you don't want your shareholders to get a bad return as the state, that's effective. And so that's all that's happening, right? Mm-hmm. Is they're just trying to make sure that their shareholders don't get a bad return on the bonds they sold them in the past based on bad forecasts.
Yeah, and people that move to vapes, and okay, my thought is, okay, tax vapes if you want. You want to make nicotine itself a sin tax.
I'd say, I feel like it should be taxed the same way. Like it should be like, man, if that's...
I think lesser of two evils, and I agree with a nicotine tax is an appropriate way, but not at the same rate.
Well, so I don't think it's chill. I don't think that the state should be collecting tax money on the transactions that you and I. The state already collects tax on the money that whenever I make it and all kinds of shit. Like I don't think they should be inserting themselves between me and the things that I want at all.
I'm a grown adult. Let me spend my money.
Exactly. And so, in in the ultimate premise, I think that they shouldn't be taxing any of this shit. I think that they're already taxing us way too fucking much on every fucking thing. Yeah. And so I don't think that we should be getting taxed on it at all.
38% income tax.
Yeah.
Grab some here real quick.
It's all good. But the thought is that if we're going to be dealing with taxes, I think that an easy way to communicate it so that everybody can get taxed and everybody can feel like it's fair is just a nicotine tax. Mm-hmm. Nicotine in cigarettes, nicotine in vapes, everybody gets taxed. You know, whatever.
Right.
Monkey mouth. Monkey mouth. Monkey mouth. Monkey mouth.